I always thought silence was something you earned with age, a kind of peace you built slowly, like a home. But that afternoon, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my 30th floor office, silence felt like a warning. The city stretched beneath me, shimmering under the California sun, each tiny car and flashing billboard reminding me how far I'd come and how far I'd run. The silk of my cream blouse brushed lightly against my skin as I crossed my arms, staring at the phone on my desk. It buzzed again, a vibration I could feel in my teeth. I didn't have to walk closer to know the name lighting up the screen. I'd already seen it once.
Dad.
3 years. 3 years of nothing but space, hurt, and a dinner table memory I'd buried so deep I thought I'd never have to face it again. My throat tightened, irritation mixing with something softer, something I didn't want to name. I straightened my posture, smoothing a wrinkle from my pencil skirt, reminding myself who I was now. Confidence was supposed to feel like armor. Today, it felt more like thin glass. The phone buzzed a third time. Then a text appeared. "Ava, we need to talk. It's important." I let out a slow breath, steady but sharp at the edges. "Of course it's important," I whispered to myself. "It always is when they want something." I was 22 the last time I sat at that old oak dinner table, the one my mom polished every Sunday, even when no one was coming over. The house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, the familiar scent that used to mean comfort. That night, it felt like a trap. Dad sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared, jaw set the same way it always was when he'd already made up his mind. Mom kept pacing from kitchen to dining room, pretending to rearrange dishes that didn't need rearranging. And I kept tracing circles on my water glass, trying to hold myself together. I'd just told them I didn't want to take the medical school placement Dad had pushed for. I'd gotten accepted into a design program in Seattle, something I'd worked towards silently, quietly, late at night after shifts at the cafe. I thought they'd be proud of my courage. Instead, Dad slammed his fork down so hard the metal rang against the plate. "Selfish," he spat. "You're being completely selfish, Ava." The word hit me like someone had flicked a match into a room full of gasoline. My chest burned, my fingers trembling as I tried to swallow the sting. Selfish. My voice cracked, embarrassingly soft. Because I want to choose my own life? Dad leaned back, crossing his arms. Because you're throwing away a future your mother and I worked our whole lives to give you. You're being dramatic, ungrateful. Mom tried to step in, her voice timid. "Maybe we should just..." "No, Diane," he snapped. "She needs to hear this." The lump in my throat grew, so tight it felt like it might choke me. "You're not listening," I whispered. "Design matters to me. It always has." Dad's eyes hardened. "Then you're making the biggest mistake of your life." I looked between them, Mom with her worried eyes, Dad with his disappointment like a shadow swallowing the room. I suddenly felt like a stranger in my own home. My grandmother's bracelet, a thin gold band she'd given me the year before she passed, glinted under the dining room light. "Always choose the life that lets your soul breathe," she had told me. I could almost hear her voice now. My chair scraped the floor as I stood. Dad's head jerked up, surprised. "Ava, sit back down," he demanded. But I shook my head, my legs unsteady yet stronger than they had ever been. "No," I said softly. "I can't stay somewhere I'm not allowed to be myself." I grabbed my coat, the bracelet warm against my wrist like a pulse guiding me out the door. And that night, the night he called me selfish, I walked out of their house and into my own life. Seattle greeted me with rain, soft, steady, endless rain that soaked into my clothes the same way fear soaked into my bones. I stepped off the bus with one suitcase, $312 in my bank account, and a stubborn, trembling determination to prove I wasn't the selfish girl my father said I was. The design program wasn't glamorous. The building smelled like old carpet and strong coffee. The hallways echoed with the sounds of clicking keyboards and printers that jammed every other
hour.
But from the moment I walked into that first night class, something inside me expanded, like a window finally cracking open in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. I worked at a tiny bakery at dawn, attended classes in the evening, and spent nights sketching until my fingers cramped. Some mornings, I'd stare at myself in the mirror, eyes puffy, hair a mess, half asleep, and wonder if Dad was right. Maybe I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But then I'd catch a glimpse of my grandmother's bracelet on my wrist, and I'd breathe again. It was during my second semester that I met Leona Hart, the kind of woman who walked into a room like she owned the air. CEO of a boutique interior firm, mentor to young designers, and the first person who looked at my work and saw potential instead of rebellion. She found me sketching alone in the studio one evening, rain tapping against the windows like a quiet encouragement. "That's yours?" she asked, pointing at a minimalist living room rendering I'd been reworking for hours. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious about the smudged lines and uneven shading. She hummed, studying it closely. "You see people in spaces, not just the spaces themselves. That's rare." No one had ever said something that kind to me, or that true. Leona became my anchor. She showed me how to pitch ideas, how to negotiate without shrinking, how to walk into meetings like I belonged there even when I felt like an imposter. Under her guidance, I learned 3D modeling, color psychology, lighting theory, things my parents never even knew existed. My first win came almost accidentally. A small cafe owner saw one of my student projects posted on a class page and asked if I could redesign his storefront. The job paid barely anything, but I poured everything I had into it. When the cafe reopened, locals loved it. Photos were posted, tagged, shared, and for the first time, someone introduced me as a designer. A month later, I landed a freelance job redesigning an apartment lobby. Then another. Then another. By 24, I was bringing in enough money to move into a modest but charming one-bedroom apartment with big windows and sunlight that spilled across the hardwood floors in the mornings. I kept my life quiet online, no boasting, no flashy posts. Just a few photos of coffee cups and rainy skylines. Nothing that would hint at the independence I was building brick by careful brick. I didn't tell my parents anything. Not about the cafe project. Not about the growing client list. Not about Leona becoming a second mother to me in ways my real parents never were. Silence was easier, safer. But as my portfolio grew, so did something else, a confidence I couldn't hide forever. And I think deep down, I knew the day was coming when the world I'd built would collide with the world I'd left behind. The knock on my office door came on a Wednesday, the kind of Wednesday where everything had been going perfectly. My team had just finalized a luxury penthouse design. A new international client had emailed a contract, and the jasmine candle on my desk filled the room with a soft, warm sweetness. Then my assistant poked her head in. Ava? There are 2 people asking for you. They said they're your parents." My stomach tightened so fast I actually reached for the edge of my desk. For a moment, my brain refused to process the sentence. My parents. Here. In my building. In my space. I stood there frozen, torn between anger, fear, and an unexpected flicker of curiosity. Were they really here to see me, or did they just need something again? I took a slow breath, smoothed the front of my navy blazer, and nodded. "Send them in." The door swung open, and suddenly I was 22 again, except this time, I wasn't the girl shrinking under their expectations. Mom stepped in first, clutching her purse tightly. Dad followed, older, more tired, but still carrying that familiar weight of authority in his shoulders. Their eyes swept across my office, the high ceilings, the soft lighting, the framed designs on the walls, the glass desk, the plush gray chairs, the subtle gold accents that reflected my personal style. An entire space carved from years of grinding, sacrificing, failing, rebuilding. Mom's lips parted. "Ava, this is beautiful."
Dad didn't speak.
His gaze lingered on the plaques behind me, Hart and Mitchell Designs, Executive Creative Director. My name etched in gold. I watched his eyes narrow slightly, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that shouldn't exist. I gestured to the seats opposite my desk. "You can sit." Mom sank down slowly. Dad sat stiffly, as if the chair might judge him. I circled behind my desk, The click of my heels the only sound in the room. When I sat, I folded my hands and waited. Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't know how else to reach you," he said. "You haven't returned any calls." Because every call felt like reopening wounds that never fully healed. Mom leaned forward. "We're sorry for coming unannounced, but we needed to talk to you face to face." I nodded once, guarded.
About what?
They exchanged a look, the kind couples share when they rehearse their lines in the car. Dad exhaled slowly. "We're struggling, Ava. Financially. The house needs repairs, medical bills have been piling up, and things are tighter than we expected. We thought maybe you could help." There it was. The reason. The need beneath the urgency. I didn't speak. I just watched them take in my office again. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, the elegant marble table in the corner, the mood board wall filled with swatches and sketches, the custom-made bookshelves. Mom's voice trembled. "We didn't realize your job was so successful."
Job.
I repeated softly, almost amused. "This isn't a job, Mom." Dad frowned. "What do you mean?" I leaned back, letting a slow confidence settle into my body, a confidence built from the rain, the late nights, the rejections, the small victories, the years of silence. "I own half this company," I said. "Hart and Mitchell. I'm the Mitchell." Mom gasped. Dad blinked, jaw going slack for the first time in my life. "I've led over 50 projects in the last 5 years," I continued. "Commercial, residential, luxury. Clients fly from all over the country to meet me. My work has been featured in magazines you probably have sitting on your coffee table."
Silence.
I watched the truth crash into them like a wave. You're an owner?" Mom whispered. Dad swallowed. "How, when?" "When I walked out of your house," I replied, my voice steady. "When you called me selfish for choosing a life that wasn't yours." Their shock hung in the air, thick, heavy, overwhelming. Dad finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Ava, I didn't know." "No," I corrected gently. "You didn't try to know." I didn't say the words to hurt him. I said them because they were true. Because this moment, this realization was something he needed to face. Mom wiped her eyes. Dad looked at the floor. And for the first time ever, I felt taller than him. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The silence wasn't sharp like the one at that dinner years ago. It was heavier, slower, like everyone in the room was finally realizing the truth at the same time. Dad cleared his throat, but the authority he used to carry like armor wasn't there anymore. "Ava," he said quietly, we need your help. We wouldn't have come if it wasn't serious." My fingers brushed against the edge of my desk, steady and calm. A version of me, the old me, would have folded instantly, desperate for approval. But the woman sitting here now had built too much, bled too much, grown too much to crumble. "I'm willing to help," I said slowly, "but not without conditions." Mom looked up, surprised. Dad stiffened, old instincts flaring. "Conditions?" he repeated.
Yes.
"Because I'm not doing this as the daughter you used to control. I'm doing this as the woman I became without you." Dad opened his mouth, but I lifted a hand, not rudely, but firmly. "Let me finish." He closed it. I took a breath. Condition 1, respect. Real respect. Not the kind you give when I'm quiet or obedient. If I help financially, then you help emotionally, by treating me like an adult with her own life. That means no guilt, no shame, no backhanded comments about my career. Mom nodded quickly. Dad didn't, but he didn't argue either. Condition 2, I continued. Therapy. Mom blinked. For us?
For all of us, I said.
Separately, and eventually, maybe together. But especially you, Dad. He recoiled slightly. I don't need. You do, I said softly, but with a strength that left no room for debate. The night you called me selfish wasn't just about school. It was about control, about fear, about your need to shape me into something you understood. And that hurt both of us more than you realize. He looked away, not angry, ashamed. Mom squeezed his hand gently, her own eyes shining. Maybe it's time, she whispered. I continued. Condition 3. You both work on your own dreams, not mine. Mom, you used to talk about opening a small plant shop. You gave that up because Dad thought it wasn't practical. Dad looked at her, startled. You never. She did, I said. And you shut it down. Mom's voice trembled. I didn't want to argue. I leaned forward, my voice warming. I'll help fix the house. I'll handle the medical bills. I'll support you through this rough patch. But only if you promise me you won't fall back into old patterns. I don't want to be the family hero while you keep living the same stuck life. Dad's eyes glistened in a way I'd never seen. And what do you want from me? He asked quietly. I took a breath. Deep, steady, healing. Accountability. I want you to say the words you refused to say that night. He hesitated, pride, pain, ego all fighting at once. Then his shoulders dropped. Ava, his voice cracked. I'm sorry. The words weren't perfect. They weren't eloquent. But they were real. Mom covered her face with her hands and sobbed softly, relief, guilt, love all tangled together. I stood, walked around the desk, and sat beside them. Not as their child seeking approval. Not as the girl who walked out of their house. As the woman who finally knew her worth. I'll help, I said gently. But from now on, we grow together. No more tearing each other down. Dad nodded. Mom reached for my hand. For the first time in years, we felt like a family, broken, bruised, but finally facing the right direction. The days that followed were slower, softer, like the world had finally stopped spinning long enough for all of us to breathe. Dad texted me updates about small house repairs he'd started doing on his own. Mom sent pictures of plant pots she'd been collecting, labeling each with names like Future Shop Inventory, even though the store didn't exist yet. Not physically, at least. But the shift was real. And I felt it every time my phone buzzed. One afternoon, a week after their visit, I drove to their house. The weather was warm, sunlight casting golden ribbons across the street. I carried a small box with me, something I'd taken years to be able to give back. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Ava, she said, pulling me into a tight hug. Her arms used to feel like hesitation. Today they felt like home. Dad was in the living room assembling a wooden shelf, probably his quiet attempt at supporting Mom's plant shop dream. He looked up when I walked in, and for a second, we both froze in a moment neither of us knew how to navigate. Then he nodded. A small nod. Humble. Human.
And it was enough.
We sat together, not perfectly, not easily, but willingly. Mom made mint tea. Dad actually asked me questions about my work without sounding defensive or dismissive. I could see the effort, the unfamiliar stretch of a man trying to unlearn years of habits. After tea, I reached into my bag and placed the small box on the table. Mom tilted her head. What's that? I opened it slowly. Inside, cushioned in soft fabric, was my grandmother's gold bracelet, the one that had held my courage on nights when no one else did. The symbol of the girl I was and the woman I became. Mom gasped softly. Dad watched, unsure. This, I said, is the reason I survived the years between then and now. I slipped it off my wrist and placed it in Mom's hands. I want you to have it, I said gently, because you're choosing your life again just like I did. Her eyes filled instantly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ava, are you sure? I nodded. It brought me to where I needed to go. Now, it can do the same for you. Dad cleared his throat, the emotion hitting him harder than he expected. Your grandmother would be proud of you, kiddo. My chest tightened, not from pain but from something unfamiliar and warm. Healing. As I got up to leave, the evening sun poured through the windows, turning the room gold, the same way my future used to look in my dreams. At the door, Dad stopped me. Ava, he said, voice low. Walking out that night, I blamed you for it. But now I realize it was the best thing you ever did. For you. For us. I smiled softly. It wasn't selfish. It was necessary. He nodded. Thank you for giving us another chance. I stepped outside, the gentle wind brushing against my skin. And with a steady exhale, I whispered the truth that had taken me years to earn. Walking away wasn't the end, it was the beginning.